It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day.
Hi. I forgot to press the button again. There's a button that says start the show. There's another button that says flip to the main camera. That's the button I pressed. I didn't press the button that says start the show. Gah! I'm really tired this morning. As I was just explaining to you, when you couldn't hear me, I didn't get the show prep started until late last night. So I got to bed late. I didn't get very much sleep. I'm really tired. Blah. Anyway, I forgot to start the show. So let's just start it over since there's only a few of you here, and then I'll just cut out that beginning part. Yeah? Cool. So 7:32. All right. Bear with me.
It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I've never seen you before. It's so nice to see you today. So nice to see you for the first time, bright and early. Welcome to today's show. Today's August 14th. This is Coffee and Cloud Native. I'm Adrian Goins. Every night, I go out and hunt down interesting news about Cloud Native and Kubernetes for you, and every day I come here and I talk to you about it. We have a bunch of people in the chat. We're off to a slightly late start today, so I'm going to skip most of my intro, and we are just going to dive in. How does that sound, huh? A little different? A little Friday? Maybe try to get out of here a little early? Not going to happen. I got so much stuff to talk about. So, let's pause real quick and say hi to everybody who's in the chat. Hey, Caroline. Trix, Peter, Devin, Ariel, Vasilis. Oh, it's so great to see all of you every single morning. Hey, Cedric, nice. Benoy. My beauty nap? Really? Do I look like I need a beauty nap? I was telling my wife that after the show I might actually go back to sleep and then get up right before the meeting that I have with my boss and be like, no, I've been up all morning. And he's probably going to watch the show, so now I can't do that. Darn it! All right, yesterday everybody had a little bit of a freak out because apparently Docker changed a bunch of stuff, and change is scary. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Not change. Change can be a big deal, but I don't think what Docker did is a big deal. Basically, they changed their pricing, and a bigger part of that is that they changed this retention policy, which I'll talk about in a second. For me, nothing changed. I have one private repo that I occasionally put things into when I need to share something that the world shouldn't see. I have lots of public repos out there. Remember why companies exist. They exist to make money. And even if they're giving something away for free, they need to make money somewhere else. Docker sold all of their monetizable assets to Mirantis earlier this year. And what they're left with is a skeleton crew, a small bit of intellectual property, and a desire to go back to doing what they were doing in the beginning, which means making really cool tools for developers to use. They kept Docker Hub. And I don't know what the pricing was before, but basically, if you're just an individual, nothing changes. You get one private repo, and you get lots of free repos. If you're a pro, well, you got to pay a little bit, and if you're a team, let's look at what these things actually mean. If you're an individual, you don't get parallel builds. You know what? I've never used parallel builds. If I have, it was an accident, so I don't really care. If you are a team, if you're a pro, you get 2 parallel builds. Okay, great. Neither individual nor pro get role-based access control or unlimited teams. Okay, I don't need that. And then scrolling down, you get a limitation on pulls per 6 hours. So I suppose if you have something that's super, super, super popular, you might run into that as an issue. Really, I think it's going to be that big of a deal. Where it is going to be a deal is over here. What is the container image retention limit and how does it affect my account? If you have a container image that has not been pushed or pulled for 6 months, they're going to delete it. And that's just if you're on the free plan. Really? It still doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. If you have a container image that you pushed out there, it's using storage that Docker is paying for. I have hundreds of container images that I've built and pushed and pulled and tested and forgotten about and stopped using and never deleted, because why delete something when you can just keep it out there forever for free? Honestly, it's great that they're going to come along and delete those things, because I maintain the Hugo image, and I wonder How many people are really using the Hugo container image from 2 years ago? Probably zero, maybe one. But if it gets deleted, then they'll probably upgrade, and maybe that's a good thing. If this is a problem for you, just push and pull your stuff once every 6 months. Great. If you have an environment that's so fragile that it might reboot itself once every 5 years and go to pull a container image that never needs to be updated, host it yourself. It's trivial to put your own Docker image registry out there. There's tools that will do it. There's the registry container image from Docker. There's Sonatype Nexus. There's JFrog Artifactory. There's a bunch of stuff. So just host it yourself. And this is what a lot of companies are already doing. When Docker first implemented a pay plan, companies like Elastic were like, you know what, we'll just host it ourselves. And then, great, you control it, you pay for your own storage, and then you'll actually be incentivized to manage your container stuff responsibly. Ultimately, I think this is a good thing. They're going to start nuking images on November 1st. Moving on. Mirantis, the other piece of news from yesterday. Funny, Docker does something. Mirantis had bought Docker. It's a nice little segue, right? Mirantis bought Lens. I don't really understand. I get Mirantis bought Lens. That's cool. I don't know why they call Lens an integrated development environment. When I think of an IDE, I think of like Delphi or Eclipse or something like that. I don't really think of something managing workloads as an IDE. Container management platform, sure, but not an IDE. What it does give them the ability to say is that they're the world's most popular Kubernetes IDE. They're also the only Kubernetes IDE. And just because they called themselves that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But whatever. Mirantis bought Containa. But somehow they didn't get Lens, which was owned by Containa. Lens went to this company called, or not company, but like this technology collective called Lakeend Labs or something. And they describe themselves on this very sparse website that you can't even see the font at the bottom. It says, Lakeend Labs is a collective of cloud-native compute geeks and technologists committed in preserving and making available the open source software and products of Containa Incorporated. Written in super, super, super tiny font in a super dark gray on black background, which tells me that maybe they're not actually all about that. Anyway, they got Lens somehow, and then they open sourced it. And that's great. And then yesterday, Mirantis announced that they bought Lens. So they'd already bought Containa. They didn't get the IP. They went out and bought the IP later from somebody who was committed to keeping it open source. It smells like shenanigans to me. But good job. Whoever got paid twice. Mirantis now owns Lens. What does it mean? What it means is that the entire industry is waking up to the fact that container management platforms are a fundamental part of an enterprise Kubernetes strategy. Mirantis is not stupid. Mirantis doesn't just waste money. Mirantis doesn't just, they didn't wake up and be like, I want to be like IBM who bought OpenShift, and I want to be like SUSE who bought Rancher, and so we're going to go do the same thing. No, they recognize that they need to get into this game fast. You got Tanzu, you got OpenShift, you got Rancher, you've got some other stuff out there, and they want to play. Not a problem. Look at the other stuff that's out there now. Who's going to get bought next? I was wondering, like, Kubler, who's going to buy them? Oracle? Who else doesn't have a container management platform and needs one and can't just quickly build one? Like, Amazon's just going to build their own. Anyway, interesting. Last week we had Open Service Mesh. And I was like, not really news. It's new. SMI. Go use Service Mesh Hub from Solo. If you want to know what's going on in Open Service Mesh, though, remember, I think it was yesterday, I had that like super crazy long article. Well, here's another one. I'm just going to scroll through this. I'm going to grab the little scroll bar there. This guy gives you everything about OSM. How it works, what it implements, how it handles its control and data plane. He then drills down into it with excruciating detail. Not excruciating like it's painful, but like he goes deep. And then you got deployment architecture, use cases, demonstration applications, ingress and egress configurations. I'm 25% of the way down the page and still scrolling. I'm going to stop scrolling. It's everything you want to know about OSM, and it falls somewhere between like an overview and a how-to. It's not a tutorial. It's like, it's not a how to do it. And it's not just a what it can do. It's kind of somewhere in between. He's got screen caps. There's enough here that you could go and get started with it. And it's not just waving the OSM flag. He also talks about its shortcomings. For example, it doesn't have features like circuit breaking and location-based load balancing. Those are things, if you need, you should get them from somebody who does have them. Circuit breaking is kind of a fundamental service mesh component. I would be very surprised if they don't get that in there pretty quickly. Good deep dive into OSM. You want to check it. Continuing along the service mesh theme, Sudhakar has created a service mesh in Kubernetes guide in pictures. We were talking about visual learning the other day with Aureli's Kubernetes instructions, the sketch notes. And I don't know why I can't remember the name of what she calls them. Anyway, the pictures. And they're great. They're great. He has kind of the same thing. I was talking to somebody a few days ago about service mesh, and he said he didn't really understand if service mesh was a thing. Like, are people really using it? Are people thanks. You guys are talking in the chat, which I love, which is great, but I see something and then I totally like poof, I just background whatever I was saying. Anyway, he was asking if service mesh was a thing. Are companies using it? How are they using it? Is it just a fad? And I sent him some information about that I thought would answer his question. And his response was, no, I understand like what it does and the value of it, but I don't have any scars from it. I thought that was a really interesting way to present his need. He needed to understand mistakes that he or others could have learned from. He needed to have been bitten by the technology in order to understand what he should do with it. It's like if you have a dog and you treat the dog badly and the dog bites you, you learn not to treat the dog. However, you were just treating it. He's looking at his cloud native applications the same way. Push them to their limits until something horrible happens and then roll it back a little bit and you know what your limits are. I sent him this. Well, it doesn't necessarily describe scars. It does describe things like in a normal Kubernetes networking environment, you're going to have so much communication that the things that process it are just going to become overwhelmed. And in order to handle it, you can't spend time managing it. He has a section a little further down. So he talks about sidecars and stuff like that and CRDs. And then he has this section of what can a service mesh do? It's great. So let's start with the first one here. Which of my microservices is under a lot of load and why? Answer, no idea. The default Kubernetes setup doesn't answer this. We could deploy a sidecar proxy to our pods that can send service level metrics to some monitoring server, or we could just deploy a service mesh. And that's how each of his questions are answered. It's like, here's a problem, here's how you could solve it by yourself, or you could just deploy a service mesh. It's funny, it's lighthearted, it's a great explanation of service mesh with pictures. So if you have anybody in your life who's just still like not 100% on board with the service mesh idea, this will be in the video description. Now we're into releases and things that happened yesterday. Helm Controller builds GitOps pipelines using Helm. It's from the FluxCD project. It's an experimental thing that they've been working on. So it's experimental, means don't run it in production, but you're going to run it in production anyway. Just don't. There you go. Standard disclaimer for open source software. Or the mutation of a CRD called a Helm release inside of the cluster. And then it performs actions with the result being a declarative way to have Helm charts deployed in the cluster and have those manifests be stored in Git. It depends on another piece called Source Controller. Hey, look at that. I have a Source Controller tab for you. It depends on Source Controller. It can also work with another thing called Notification Controller, and all of these pieces together form what's called the GitOps Toolkit. The GitOps Toolkit is coming out from Flux, who I'm pretty sure are actually just Weave, or Weaveworks, and other contributors, of course. Anyway, it's the GitOps Toolkit, has all of these pieces together, and this is designed, they're working on making this into what will become Flux v2. Essentially, it allows you to build build GitOps pipelines and whole CI/CD systems inside of Kubernetes. You can find more about the Toolkit by going to toolkit.fluxcd.io. I may not have that in the show notes, but I do have the Helm controller in there. And if you are already using K3S, you already have something like this in K3S. It's the Helm chart CRD, and this gives you a declarative way to deploy Helm charts into a K3S cluster. If you don't want to go down the whole GitOps toolkit path, you're already using K3S, you already have this. Either way, if you use Flux, if you have an environment where you can deploy this, they are looking for feedback as they want to turn this into what becomes Flux V2. And continuing down the Helm theme, we have the Managing Kubernetes Applications with Helm course from Linux Foundation. I love Linux Foundation courses. So this class is a combo of video training, hands-on labs, assignments, and covers everything from... That's not actually very useful. Setting up Helm, using Helm, creating Helm charts, understanding application lifecycle, and ends with instruction on how to host charts in your own repo or in somebody else's repo. If any of you have taken this, please let me know in the comments or in the chat, which I'll look at in a second. I'm blocking it out because I have a lot to talk about today. If you are in the, or looking at considering taking the Cloud Academy bootcamp thing, the Cloud Engineer Bootcamp, LFS 244 is contained in the advanced one. So for $999, you've already got the CKA, which is $300. Good Lord, what is that? It's my phone. I have no idea why my phone just started making noise. I blame Siri. I'm like sitting here, suddenly there's music playing. Probably gonna get a copyright strike from YouTube for that. Anyway, so for $1,000, for $1,000, you've already got the CKA. Now you've got LFS 244 in there. So basically, if you think any other one of these classes is worth the missing $400, then you know the bootcamp paid for itself. However, if you are going to be at KubeCon next week, I don't have this on a tab, but if you are going to be at KubeCon next week, I saw this from the CNCF yesterday, and I'll just read it to you. It says, along with your event registration, you will receive a 50% off voucher for the CKA and CKAD exam, plus training bundle, as well as 30% off of all other Linux Foundation trainings. Find your golden ticket and all details within the event platform, navigate to experiences, and click virtual swag. The discount is only valid for trainings and exams purchased before midnight UTC on August 20th. So right there, you could get a 30% discount on the Cloud Engineer Bootcamp and save money. It's a smoking deal. So if you're going to KubeCon, check that out or use it for any other classes that you want to take from Linux Foundation. When I'm teaching people about Kubernetes, I like when I get to the part that says that services aren't real. Because we talk about services like they're real, but they're not actually real. They're just a logical thing that exists that mutates a bunch of IP tables rules to make magic happen. Well, have you ever wondered works? Have you ever had to troubleshoot it? Have you ever been like, wow, it's just like you get in there and you know IP tables -L and you just see all this stuff scroll by and you're like, I don't even know where to begin with this. This is part 3 of a 3-part article on Docker and Kubernetes networking. And in here, Dustin recreates manually container communication with services in Kubernetes by using just IP tables rules. He did this so that he could understand how this works, and he wrote up a massive blog article for us that you can follow along with. It's pretty amazing. It includes explanations on weird IP tables things like when you need promiscuous mode and hairpin mode on your bridges and how to detect when communication failures are a result of that. Hairpin always gets people. Hairpin is where something is communicating out to a NAT endpoint, and then the traffic is actually coming back into the same thing. Most devices that do source natting don't do hairpin mode, but iptables does. You just have to turn it on. So it shows you first how to turn it on the interfaces, and then how to back that out and turn it on in places that are more global. And by the end of the article, you will have recreated on a Linux machine communication that Kubernetes does for you, and you will realize just how much nicer it is to use Kubernetes. The tools section of the day, not tool of the day, the tools section of the day, and we're going to run out of time again, man. All right. My friends at Flaunt put together a cool cheat sheet of fun things you can do with kubectl. This is just a lightweight Friday article for you to go and read, and it has, like, my JSON path skills are weak. I don't use that portion of modifying the output of kubectl often enough to have it retained in memory, so I end up just like piping stuff to grep and getting frustrated. This has a lot of really cool things that you can do with kubectl, like find all non-running pods, get a list of nodes and their memory size, get a list of nodes and the number of pods on them, find nodes that didn't have a daemon set pod scheduled to them for some reason, so if you're doing troubleshooting, use kubectl top to get a list of pods sorted by CPU and memory consumption. You could use this to set limits for your workloads. Sort the list of pods by some parameter, like number of restarts. There's about a dozen more cool things that you can do with kubectl in here. Thank you to Flaunt. I'll have that in the video description. Yesterday, tool of the day was Capsule, which created single cluster multi-tenancy through namespace management. This is a project that's actually part of Kubernetes SIGs, and it's a project called the Hierarchical Namespace Controller. This does parent-child relationships for namespaces, and it gives people the ability to create child namespaces under a namespace, even if they don't have the ability to create namespaces globally in the cluster, and then do all of the RBAC permissioning stuff around that. So it's another way to get a team to have namespace style isolation without basically single cluster multi-tenancy. Give somebody a namespace, and then they can carve that up for stuff inside of it as they see fit. Experimental, alpha, don't run it in production, but check it out. They have a whole user's guide and detailed information about who and what and why and best practices and concepts, and like it's not just how to deploy it, but it's the theory behind why this is necessary and useful. The last three things of the day we are going to have to skip in order to get to tool of the day and not run over time. I will bounce those to Monday, but I will just give you a hint with one of them. It was about pirates. You have to come back on Monday to see what that was. Today's tool of the day. Tool of the day. What I need, you know, in Quake, it's like that voice comes on at the beginning. It's like, or like, I don't know, some old 8-bit karate game or something. I need that deep robot voice, like, tool of the day, fight. ClusterLint is from DigitalOcean, and it's another tool that scans your cluster for best practices and makes recommendations, but it does some additional things. Like it'll detect unused resources or crufty things that were left behind, like unused PVCs or secrets or stuff like that. But it also has scans that are platform specific. So you can activate or deactivate recommendations according to where your Kubernetes cluster is running. You can also filter things out. So for example, stuff in kubesystem frequently runs with host network or with privilege mode, and you don't want to just clutter up your report with, it's like when we used to run Nessus scans against networks, and they would be like, medium level severity, host responds to ping. Really? Host IP address is determinable. Anyway, there's garbage like that in all of these Kubernetes best practices, scan utilities, and stuff. I use DigitalOcean. I use their Docs DigitalOcean Kubernetes service. I like it. It is not perfect, but it is a lot less expensive than Amazon or GKE or, well, EKS or GKE, or even running Kubernetes on your own instances. They manage the control plane. It's a managed service. Say what you want about DigitalOcean's shortcomings, and they do have them. They're more than made up for by the positive side of how they run their business, the tutorials that they produce for the community, and the response that you do get from their support guys. The DigitalOcean Kubernetes service is affordable. If you haven't looked at it, there is a link in the video description where you can get $50 of credit if you sign up for it. I also get $50 of credit, so go sign up. I don't know if I get 50, I get 25. I get something, but you don't pay for it. You get free, I get free, DigitalOcean gets a customer. You can check it out. ClusterLint has lots of options. You can even annotate your workloads so that when you run ClusterLint against them, it's an in-cluster scanner. It doesn't scan local manifest, so it actually reaches out to the cluster, pulls down all the stuff, and then does the scanning and reports it. So any of the annotations that control what scans should be ignored or disabled, it will be able to pay attention to. And then you can also, interesting, you can run, didn't see this last night. If you have something running in your cluster that you need to keep secret, you can implement a scan for it using a local Go plugin. That's neat. So they have an example plugin that'll show you how to make your own scans for the things that you know you need in your cluster. So go use secret cluster having cluster haver. All right, last minute, we will check the chat. We see we got some people talking about some stuff that was earlier. Tej says a few months ago, it was about $600. Not sure what that was referring to. Cloud Academy Bootcamp or the LFS course. I know that Linux Foundation changes their pricing. I also know that these are dark days. Like, people need to make money. If they don't make money, they're gonna go out of business. I don't want Linux Foundation and CNCF to go out of business. Just saying. All right, nothing else in the chat. Got a couple minutes left. That's it for today. Thank you all for coming. I took away my phone, which acts as my teleprompter because it was playing, I don't even know what. So I have to put it back so I can do my outro. This is like the world's worst produced show. Michael asks a great question. Why does everyone hate on self-hosted Kubernetes? I don't hate on self-hosted Kubernetes. I run a self-hosted Kubernetes cluster here in my house. I used to run it out on Amazon as well. And paying somebody to manage the control plane just means you don't have to manage the control plane. And so you don't have to worry about etcd falling apart. You don't have to worry about anything except just running your worker nodes. There are two types of, there are many types, but in this conversation, there are two types of people who care about Kubernetes. Those who just want to use it, and those who want to build it and manage it. If you don't want to build it and manage it, but you just want to use it, the hosted solution is what's right for you. Just let somebody else worry about the etcd garbage. And if it doesn't work, you have somebody that you can go and like poke with a stick and tell them to fix it. And that's helpful if you're somebody like me who doesn't have a whole IT staff of, people that can poke with a stick. Hosting it yourself is a great solution. The end. Oh man, it's gonna be one of those days. Okay, so it's 8 o'clock. I'm gonna have to go now. I'm waiting for my teleprompter to scroll to the outro portion of the script because I don't remember what I'm supposed to say. Basically, that's it. That's all for the show. I'll put the links and stuff in the video description afterwards. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get a link to that. If you have anything you'd like me to look at, tweet. Find me on Rancher User Slack. Somehow let me know. If you tweet, you can use the hashtag CNCN, and I will pick it up. If I used a tool that you use, let me know in the comments. I like hearing that people are using, if I used a tool, if I talked about a tool that you use. I like hearing that people are using the tools that I talk about or that I cover stuff that people are actually using. And of course, if you liked what you saw today, even though I really needed to have more coffee than I did when I started the show, please click the thumbs up button. Join me next week. I'll be here every weekday as long as there's something to talk about, laugh about. Thank you all for joining. Sorry about the audio again. I'm going to cut that part out today. And I will see you in the next show. Later.